In this lesson, we will be solving some more quadratic equations using the zero product property. And so before explaining how we're going to use this property to solve quadratic equations, we have to understand the concept behind it. So let's take a look at this equation. A times B equals 0. Okay, so basically a number multiply another number equals 0. Okay, so let's think, what are some possible numbers that multiply together and equal 0? Well, I have a couple examples here. 5 times 0 is 0, 6 times 0 is 0, negative 48 times 0 is 0, and 0 times 14 is 0, 0 times negative 100 is 0, 0 multiplied by 14.5 is 0. And so, what do you notice about these numbers? What I notice is that in every single one of these multiplication, one of the numbers or variables, that's either the A or the B, right? A or the B, the first number or the second number, it always has to be 0, right? In order for two things to multiply together to become 0, one of these has to be 0, right? Either the first number or the second number. And so what this means, okay, and this is essentially the concept of what we're going to apply to the next couple of problems, is this means that whenever you have two things that multiply together and equal 0, that's going to lead to A equals 0, the first thing equaling 0, or the second one equals 0, right? Because we just said that one of these numbers has to be 0, okay? And so this is the main concept, and it might seem random right now, but we're going to apply this in the next slide. So basically, anytime you have two things that multiply together and equal 0, in this case A and B, the very next step that we can write down is that the first thing is going to equal to 0, or the second thing is going to equal to 0, okay? So this is what we're applying on the next slide. And so how does this actually help us solve quadratic equations, right? Well, remember the main concept was that whenever you have two things that multiply together and equal 0, this means that one of these has to be 0, right? So A equals 0 or the B equals 0, okay? So if we think, what's another way to write multiplication? We can write multiplication using parentheses, right? So if we just rewrite the property like this, we have parentheses A times parentheses B equals 0. Now this kind of matches up with the problem that we have here, right? And so if you notice this first term, the x minus 3, that's kind of like our A. And that second term, x plus 2, is kind of like our B. So since these two things are multiplying together and equaling 0, the very next step that we can do is we can take the first one, which is like the A, x minus 3, set that equal to 0, and then we set the second one, the B, right? Because x plus 2 is the B, so we set the second one to 0. Once we have that, we just solve. So we add 3 to both sides. We get x equals 3. We solve the second one, we subtract 2 both sides, and we get x equals negative 2. Since these are quadratics, they have two solutions, so our two solutions are 3, negative 2. So once again, now we're going to solve another quadratic equation, and as long as we remember that whenever two things are multiplying by each other and equaling 0, we can make whatever's in the first term equal to 0, and then we can make that second one also equal to 0. So in this case, 2x plus 1 multiplied by x plus 2 does equal 0. So we're going to take that first term, 2x plus 1, set that equal to 0, and then we're going to take the second one, x plus 2, then also set that equal to 0. And then we solve. Subtract 1 both sides, we get 2x equals negative 1. We divide by 2, and we get x equals negative 1/2. So that's one of the solutions. Our other one, we subtract 2 both sides, and we get x equals negative 2. There are our two answers. So note that this is in a different form, right? Now, all of a sudden, it kind of doesn't look like this anymore, right? We don't have two things multiplying by each other equaling 0, right? Well, what do we normally do when we have equations like this? Trinomials, we can factor it, and the form after you factor it is like this, right? So we'll find two numbers that add up to 5, two numbers that multiply to 4, and that's going to be 1 and 4. So we use the shortcut, we get x plus, we're going to put the 1 there, x plus, we'll put the 4 there, set it equal to 0, and then we have x plus 1, x plus 4 equals 0, and then from here, now since the two things are multiplying together equaling 0, x plus 1 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0, and then we solve, subtract 1, x equals negative 1, subtract 4, x equals negative 4. There are our two solutions. So note this is called the zero product property, right? So the other side of the equation, it must be 0 before using and applying the zero product property, right? Everything we've had so far, the right side is 0. But if you look at part B, the right side is 14. So we can't factor it yet. We can't use the zero product property yet. We have to make that right side 0. And so we're going to subtract 14 both sides because that's going to make the right side 0. So we bring down x squared minus 7x minus 30 equals 0. Now, since the right side is 0, find two numbers that add up to negative 7 and multiply to negative 30. And that's going to be negative 10 and 3. So we get x minus 10 times x plus 3 equals 0. We set each of those to 0. X minus 10 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. We solve each one and we get our two solutions. X equals 10 and x equals negative 3. Thank you for listening.